When Bambu Lab first teased the H2C with its hotend-changing Vortek system, I was completely hooked. It looked like the moment many of us have been waiting for. No more purge waste, 6 hot ends, Toolchanger energy. And now that I've put this machine through its paces, yeah, it's neat, it's mesmerizing, and it really delivers on what was promised. But here's the twist, they didn't promise on speed. It's not the Toolchanger killer some expected. Against the Snapmaker U1 and the Prusa XL, it struggles in one key area: filament changing time. So today, let's find out how good the H2C really is, where it shines and where it falls behind. Let's dive deep into Vortek and the H2C, right here on 24/7 Printing. Today's video is sponsored by VoxelPLA. Right after I published my H2S review, Bambu Lab dropped the bomb, probably pushed by the hugely successful Snapmaker U1. They revealed that they had been working on a filament changing system, and that's what the C in H2C stands for. Their blog post made it clear. This machine is ready for launch in 2025, and it's what many of us originally expected a big Bambu machine to be. So H2D and H2S were not the only printers in the H2 series. They were simply the stepping stones leading up to the H2C. And Bambu Lab was unusually open about this back in September. And one thing was obvious: H2C was never meant to be a classic tool changer that swaps entire toolheads. It's officially a hotend changer. 3 years in development, probably starting not long after the X1 Carbon launch, it features a rack system that holds 6 individual hot ends. Its mission? Fighting the huge purge waste that their AMS system introduced back in 2022. The painting brush analogy they used is actually quite fitting. If you were painting a colorful picture, you wouldn't clean the same brush after every color. That's wasteful and slow. Purging melted filament remnants is the exact same thing. It takes time to flush the old material out of the nozzle, and all that purged filament is pure waste. Depending on the print, this can add hours to print time and produce mountains of so-called poop waste. The Vortek approach is different. It builds on the dual nozzle toolhead we know from the H2D, but uses the right nozzle to access multiple hot ends stored on the Vortek rack. Just like switching brushes, the previously used filament gets cut and simply stays inside the hot end. Compared to tool changers like the Prusa XL or Snapmaker U1, Vortek has one key distinction. There's only one filament path feeding all Vortek hot ends, supplied by one or several AMS units. Up to 6 inductive hot ends share this single AMS-driven filament path. And that's exactly where the bottleneck starts. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's unbox this machine and see what comes with the Vortek package. Bambu Lab sent me the H2C AMS combo, which sells for $2,399 US. There are also 10 watt and 40 watt laser variants of the H2C. And yes, early H2D buyers, brace yourself. The H2C combo costs just a bit more than what the H2C cost at launch earlier this year. So, what's inside the box? First of all, it's the usual big and heavy box with an H2 series printer inside, plus an accessory box. Inside the printer you'll find the AMS, and you already get a first look at the Vortek system. The accessory box is where it gets more interesting. Here you'll find the hot end pack. 5 of the new inductive hot ends, 3 with 0.4mm nozzles, 1 with 0.2mm, and 1 with 0.6mm. Hot end number 6, another 0.4mm one, is already installed on the machine. The toolbox is the same as the one included with the H2D and comes with a spare standard 0.4mm hot end for the left nozzle. You'll also find some Vortek specific spare parts like extra silicone sleeves, a replacement latch for the induction hot end lock mechanism, and the 4-in-1 PTFE adapter so you can connect additional AMS units. Right out of the box, with one AMS, you can use 4 Vortek hot ends during a single print on the right nozzle, plus one more using the external spool holder for the left nozzle. For more, you'd need an additional AMS. Setup and calibration of the H2 printer itself is the same as on the H2D or H2S. Fully automated, straightforward, and it's fast. Where things get exciting is the setup and calibration of the Vortek hotend changer. And that's a perfect moment to take a closer look at how this whole system actually works. Before we dive into the details of Vortek, let's take a moment to talk about today's video sponsor, VoxelPLA. Regular viewers know that I've been using their materials for quite a while, and they've proven to be absolutely reliable and consistent, a breeze to work with. Their VoxelPLA Plus High Speed and VoxelPTG Plus High Speed are engineered for maximum toughness and consistency, all while staying affordable. Each roll is $16.99, and if you grab 6 or more, you get extra bulk discounts. Plus, shipping within the US is even free on orders over $75, which makes it affordable to stock up on a variety of colors. While doing so, also check their complete filtration systems for Bambu Lab P1 and X1 series and for the H2 series printers, like for the new H2C as well. X-Filter, Bento Box and Vento are engineered to keep fumes and particles inside the printers and outside of your lungs. Filters for the P2 series are coming soon. And here's a really nice bonus. The first 200 customers can get 10% off orders over $100. Just use the discount code 247VOXEL at checkout. That's about 6 rolls of filament, and you can mix and match any items in their store. Big thanks to VoxelPLA for sponsoring this video. Vortek is basically a hot-end storage and handling system. It uses 2 racks, Rack A and Rack B, and each rack holds 3 hot ends. A motor moves these racks up and down using a belted transmission. The movement is linked. When Rack A moves up, Rack B moves down and vice versa. By nature, gravity helps these kinematics. This makes the whole motion very fast, and honestly it's fascinating to watch in person. Because Vortek sits on the right side of the printer, the usable build space in the X direction is reduced by 20mm compared to the H2D. And if you ever wondered why the Vision encoder plate on the H2D is smaller than the print bed, now you know, it was designed to fit the H2C from the beginning. Each hot end is held on the rack by a small magnet at the rear of the heatsink and positioned using 2 alignment pins on the dock. The toolhead engages with a stronger magnet on the opposite side of the heatsink, which allows it to pull the hot end off the rack. At the rear of the Vortek system, there's a little gearbox with a steel pin engaging with a latch on the toolhead, which locks the induction hot end firmly in place during printing. It's triggered by a tiny lever on Rack B. That latch mechanism is also used to unlock the hot end when it's time to dock it, while still letting the magnet hold it until the rack pulls it down using the alignment pins. For the initial calibration, the toolhead automatically detects the XYZ position of each dock. Some of this process is not fully documented, so what follows is based on my observations and assumptions. So I can be wrong, but for me it's plausible. Each dock has a white marker on top. Toolhead seems to use the side camera to detect this marker, which helps determine the XY position. For set height calibration, Vortek appears to move each rack up until the hot end makes gentle contact with the toolhead, so the printer knows the exact vertical alignment. Once you place the included hot ends onto the rack, the Vortek system is set up and ready. When the hot end is docked on the rack, the printer only knows whether it's present, likely using a hall sensor as indicated by the LED and the wiring of the dock. To read the hot end's data wirelessly, such as nozzle size and temperatures for nozzle and heatsink, the toolhead must engage with it. Communication is wireless, which is impressive considering the relatively low price of these induction hot ends. Nozzle offset calibration works automatically, just like on the H2D. The default setup on H2C is simple. The included AMS2 Pro feeds the Vortek hot end on the right. The left nozzle is connected to the external spool holder. Out of the box, this gives you 5 usable filaments without poop waste. 4 for the Vortek on the right and 1 for the left nozzle. You can add more AMS units to either side. But if you use more than 6 filaments on the right, the Vortek system has to purge again. And on the left nozzle, purging starts as soon as you assign more than 1 filament to that side. So the maximum number of filaments you can print without purging is 7, by using 2 AMS units on the right plus 1 filament on the left. Overall, the system supports up to 24 filaments in a single print. According to Bambu Lab, the updated slicer chooses which materials go to which hot end for the best possible efficiency. This AMS and nozzle configuration creates some unfortunate restrictions though. Because the left nozzle moves up and down, it's not approved for flexible or abrasive filaments. The only exception for flexibles is TPU for AMS, but that material lacks flexibility and has weak layer adhesion, as we'll see later. So it's not a great substitute. And on the right Vortek nozzle, the situation is similar. TPU for AMS works, and a bunch of abrasive materials can work as well, but you're locked out of many of the exciting ones, like PPS-CF, PPA-CF, PA6CF or PET-CF. That means as soon as you want to use those abrasive filaments, or truly flexible filaments, you fall back to H2D level capabilities. Bambu Lab is working on allowing flexibles like TPU-90A on the left nozzle, but as of today, it's still restricted. I'll come back to this in the conclusion, and I'll show you a workaround for using TPU-95A on the left nozzle in just a moment. Because the very first thing I wanted to know was, how well does Vortek actually perform when switching hot ends, and therefore switching filaments? The easiest way to find out was simple: print 5 boxes in 5 individual colors. A worst case scenario, the printer would have to switch all materials on every layer. And that's when the first disappointment appeared. Over 4 hours for that print? Yes, that's still much faster than H2D and produces far less waste, but the Prusa XL needs less than half the time, and it generates less purge tower waste as well. Including Snapmaker's U1 in this comparison, but with 4 boxes, shows the same story. The H2C loses a lot of time. To understand why, I measured the changing times and broke down the entire process. Since the H2C is basically an H2D with Vortek added, we now have 2 types of filament changes. First, switching between the left and right nozzle using the swiveling mechanism that lifts and lowers the left nozzle. Including priming on the tower, this takes around 17 seconds. Then the XL at around 14 seconds. And the U1 at 13 seconds, all measured from print to print. Switching between hot ends on the Vortek side takes way longer, more than 40 seconds in many cases. Let's check the sequence. The induction nozzle is first pre-purged on the wipe tower, then the tool head briefly parks at the rear. After that, the filament is cut and the latch mechanism unlocks the hot end. The EMS pulls the filament out, the old hot end is parked, and the new one is picked up and locked into place. Then the EMS pushes new filament into the hot end, and that alone takes almost 20 seconds. A bit more priming follows, and only then does printing continue. Even though the Vortek hot end change itself is fast and nice to watch, the entire sequence is slowed down mainly by the EMS feeding process and a few built-in pauses, likely for hot end cooling or heating, and for the extruder movements. With all the individual steps involved, including the extruder pushing or pulling filament in and out the toolhead, the whole change sequence becomes quite complex. My bet is that there's still room for optimization here. I wouldn't be surprised if future updates could bring the process down to something below 30 seconds, simply because several stages look like they could be streamlined and less sequential. Still, it will always be slower than the much simpler and more direct process on the XL and the U1, where it's mostly just traveling, swapping the tool, and purging. The latest XL update might also have sped up the tool changing step, not sure about this. In the past I measured around 7 seconds for that operation. And just to be clear, all these numbers are based on timecodes taken directly from the recorded clips. A quick side note on the purging topic, since a recent update added a few new features in the slicer. Bambu Lab introduced purge modes for the H2C, a standard mode and a purge saving mode. The purge saving mode saves a bit of time and material, while the standard mode focuses on maximum print quality, especially for fine details on multi-filament prints, regardless of whether you use dry or wet filament. To see the impact, I printed several 4-color benches on the H2C, the XL and the U1, comparing performance with both dry and slightly wet PLA filament. Without diving too deep into this, the conclusion is straightforward. With dry filament, the H2C seems to print maybe a bit better here than the others, especially when it comes to those fine red details on the benchy and considering layer stacking and stringing. With purge saving mode on wet filament, H2C is noticeably more stringy than the others. At standard mode it seems on par with Snapmaker U1. XL shows noticeable defects on the fine yellow structure there. As a rule of thumb, if your filament is wet or if you're unsure about its condition, stick to the standard mode. If your filament is properly dried, like in all my prints I'll show later, purge saving mode works just fine. For the hot and change test you've seen earlier, I used the purge saving mode. The standard mode takes roughly 3 seconds longer per change. I did some of my usual multimaterial benchmark prints for comparison. The Deadpool bust, the T-Rex vault decoration, and that multi-material foot using Bambu's TPU for AMS for the flexible joints. As expected, the Deadpool print time was much faster than on the H2D or P1S, but still far behind the U1 and XL. The Deadpool bus itself looks stunning, maybe even a bit better than on the U1 and XL. A quick side note here, back then when I printed those models on the other machines, I ran them without the prime tower, so there was zero purge waste. The XL managed that just fine, but the U1 had some intense stringing on the back. The T-Rex shows how much print speed depends on the model composition. Here the H2C isn't that far off from the Prusa XL, both in purge waste and total print time. That's mostly because only 2 of the 3 colors are used per layer, so the faster left-right nozzle switching comes into play more often. The print quality is excellent on H2C. Especially the teeth turned out incredibly crisp with almost no sagging on the steep overhangs. The life-sized flexible lower leg, or simply the foot with flexible joints, is one of my favorite test models for real multi-material use. It combines PLA for the bones, PETG as a separation layer for easy support removal, and flexible filament for the joints. In this case, I had to use Bambu's TPU for AMS. The print completed successfully, which isn't always the case, and the supports came off easily as intended. But when I played around with the toes, the big one broke off right at the TPU for AMS. That stuff is brittle and weak. I'm really not a fan. It feels more like a band-aid for AMS compatibility than a true flexible filament. That led me to another project where I wanted to use real TPU on the left nozzle, a small but practical design. A friend of mine had lost the venting lid of his camping water canister and made a printable replacement with a small eyelet to attach a latch so it wouldn't get lost again. Perfect for a small multi-material print. PETG was a good choice for the lid itself. TPU 95A should work for the sealing surface, and PLA served as an easy-to-remove separation layer for the supports, since the part was printed upside down. Otherwise, the sealing surface would have been printed mid-air. I didn't know the exact thread tolerances, so I printed multiple versions scaled slightly up and down to find the perfect fit. To mark the scaling directly on the parts, I used a second PETG color and printed the text right onto the surface. Super useful, by the way. Overcoming Bambu Lab's TPU restrictions on the left nozzle was easier than expected. I simply told the printer I wanted to load TPU for AMS, which is officially supported. Then, in the slicer, I created a custom TPU profile by duplicating a TPU for AMS profile, but replacing the parameters with those from the generic TPU profile. Et voila, the print worked nicely. The printed text on the lids turned out helpful. The thread fit perfectly, with about 4 to 5% upscaling, although the lid itself was slightly too tall for a perfect seal and the eyelet was a bit too fragile for FDM printing. Some quick fixes in CAD and the final version fits and seals perfectly. So overall, a fully functional part and the processes went smoothly, except for having to trick the printer and software to use TPU in the left nozzle. Still, Bambu Lab will likely unlock proper TPU support on that side soon, once their internal testing is done. This brings us to the question, who really needs the H2C and the Vortek system, and just as important, who actually benefits from it over the H2D? In its current state, once you rely on Vortek and therefore on the AMS, you're locked out of true flexibles and some of the flagship Uber materials, like PPA-CF or PPS-CF. Ironically, the very materials the H2 series was built for. You can run them on the left nozzle, but because that nozzle moves up and down during every tool change, the risk of breakage is simply too high for brittle or abrasive filaments. And on the Vortek side, the AMS filament path basically rules out those as well. What remains is still a wide range of usable materials and colors. Plenty for creative multi-material ideas. Many combinations may look odd on paper, but you never know what users will come up with. So, what would you use the H2C for? Do you have projects where this machine becomes a must-have? Let me know in the comments. I struggle to find functional or engineering-grade use cases beyond just adding colors. Yeah, as soon as you need more than 2 materials or colors in one project, the H2C is clearly more capable than the H2D. And for high-performance stuff like PPA-CF or PPS-CF and flexibles as well, you can simply disconnect the AMS on the right nozzle, but you fall back to regular H2D capabilities. For the good and the bad, as purging is involved as soon as you use more than 2 filaments. My personal favorite still is the H2D, especially at its current price. I usually combine only 2 materials anyway. For example, the PPS exhaust hanger printed with ABS supports shown in my Ninja video last summer. The Prusa XL seems to continue to be a valid competitor. It offers more build space, 5 toolheads with dedicated toolpaths, and way faster tool changing too. But even with an enclosure, it still lacks real high temperature capabilities. It has no camera, no nozzle wipers, and the overall user experience simply isn't as convenient as on the H2 series. Switching nozzle sizes is a perfect example. On Vortek it's effortless. Just place the desired hot ends on the rack and the printer handles the rest, including reading the nozzle size and calibrating offsets automatically. On the XL you manually change, heat, clean and calibrate every nozzle. It works, but it takes more time and effort. Though you can use multiple nozzle sizes in one print. In Bambu Slicer that's not possible yet. And the Snapmaker U1, a great new player, soon widely available. Reviewers and early users agree. It's fast, reliable, well priced and surprisingly convenient. Though the software needs more polishing, the build volume is smaller and it still lacks true high temperature capabilities. And then there's Index, which we still haven't really seen on the Core 1 or do-it-yourself printers. Honestly, I want to do another big comparison of the most important Toolchanger systems once Index releases. If you want that too, type "Do it, Albert" in the comments and I'll go all in on another deep dive comparison as soon as I get my hands on Index. Thanks for watching, liking, subscribing, ring the bell. Servus and bye bye. Thank you, Shulo!